Imagine a world where your greatest nightmares don't come with sharp teeth or glowing eyes, but instead they're as thin and fragile as paper, yet somehow they're far more terrifying. That's the strange world of Courage the Cowardly Dog, a cartoon that never needed to roar loudly to frighten you, it whispered fear into your bones. Courage the Cowardly Dog is not your typical cartoon. While many shows of its time chose colorful adventures and cheerful endings, Courage existed. In a darker corner of television, where humor danced side by side with horror. At first glance, it was just a story about a pink dog living with an old couple in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. But the truth is, every episode was like a door into a nightmare filled with strange creatures, surreal villains, and uncanny mysteries. The beauty of the show was not just in its scary characters, but in how those characters reflected something much deeper. Children might have only seen monsters chasing Courage, but adults noticed the hidden meanings, fears about loneliness, the fragility of life, and even the absurdity of our world. And yet, despite being just a dog who was always afraid, Courage carried one unshakable quality: loyalty. His love for Muriel, the kind and gentle woman who cared for him, was stronger than every fear. And that love often gave him the strength to face the impossible among the many unforgettable episodes. One story stands out for being both bizarre and unsettling in a subtle way: the tale of the paper people. Unlike giant bugs, cursed spirits, or cruel villains, these beings were not fierce or muscular. They weren't even fully alive in the way we understand. They were flat, fragile, and strange, yet their very existence disturbed Courage's world in ways no other enemy had. The paper people represent the show's genius: how it could take something harmless, like a sheet of paper, and twist it into something uncanny, something that lingers in your memory long after the credits roll. Think about it. Paper is something we use every day. We write on it, we fold it, we throw it away without much thought. But in this episode, paper becomes alive. And when something so ordinary suddenly moves and thinks like a person, it unsettles us at a deeper level. It's no longer just paper, it's something other, something that breaks the rules of the world we know. That is exactly why Courage the Cowardly Dog remains so powerful. It makes us question even the simplest things and shows us how fear can be hiding in the most unexpected places. This is the genius of Cartoon Network's darker side. Unlike typical Saturday morning cartoons, Courage pushed boundaries. It used silence, eerie sound design, and distorted visuals to create fear without needing gore or jump scares. That's why episodes like Paper People still haunt viewers years later. The unsettling truth is that the scariest things are not always loud or dangerous looking. Sometimes it's the quiet, fragile, and unnatural things that disturb us the most. So, before we dive deeper into the strange arrival of the paper people, remember this: Courage is not just a cartoon. It is a lesson in storytelling, a masterclass in how fear and comedy can live together, and a reminder that even the most cowardly among us can be the bravest when it matters most. It begins quietly, like most nightmares do. There isn't a storm. There isn't a monster bursting through the door. Instead, the world feels off in a way that only Courage the Cowardly Dog can show. The farmhouse sits in the middle of the desert, as always. The wind whistles across the empty land, carrying dust and silence. But something unusual drifts with it: pieces of paper, torn and floating, like scraps of an unfinished story. At first, they seem harmless, just paper caught in the wind. But in nowhere, nothing is ever what it seems. These are not scraps from a notebook or newspapers blown from town. They move with intent. They gather together. They fold themselves crease by crease until flat shapes begin to take form. Human-like forms. Limbs and faces drawn in pencil, outlines sketched as if a child had doodled them into life. They are the paper people. They are not strong. They don't roar. They don't smash through walls. Yet their very presence is disturbing because they don't belong. Imagine watching a shadow stand up from the wall or a painting step out of its frame. That is the effect of the paper people. They walk stiffly, bending unnaturally at the folds in their bodies. Their faces are crude, like masks with features barely drawn on. And worst of all, they stare not with eyes of flesh, but with black circles inked onto their fragile heads. For Courage, this is terrifying in a different way. He has faced aliens, ghosts, demons, and creatures of all shapes and sizes. But the paper people are uncanny because they are both alive and not alive. They crinkle when they move, they tear when they bend too far, yet they keep walking as though nothing is wrong. They are as fragile as a piece of notebook paper, yet they refuse. To die. The farmhouse becomes their stage. They slip under doors, flatten against the walls, and peer through windows. They multiply as more scraps drift in, folding themselves into new figures. It feels as though the house is under siege, not by soldiers or beasts, but by a parade of lifeless drawings come to life. For Muriel, they are curious. She sees them almost like harmless dolls. For Eustace, they are a nuisance. But for Courage, every paper footstep is a scream in his mind. He knows that when something in nowhere arrives without reason, it never ends well. What makes the paper people frightening is not what they do, but what they represent. They are frail, they can be torn apart easily, yet they persist. They are impossible to reason with because they don't speak in words, only in rustles and crumples. They are like puppets without strings, controlled by some invisible force. And that mystery is more terrifying than any clear enemy, a monster you can fight, a ghost you can banish. But what do you do when the enemy is nothing but paper? The creators of the show knew exactly what they were doing. They took something everyone is familiar with, paper, and gave it life in the wrong way. It's not bloodthirsty, it's not violent, but it's deeply unsettling. Paper is supposed to be silent. It's supposed to stay on your desk or in your notebook. But in this episode, it doesn't. It walks, it watches, and it surrounds you. And because it is so thin and so light, you can't hear it coming until it's already there. Courage's fear is our fear. As he watches them creep closer, his body shakes, his teeth chatter. He runs in circles, trying to block the windows and doors, but more paper slips through. The sound design adds to the dread. Every rustle of paper becomes loud, sharp, and endless. It's a reminder that even something as ordinary as a sheet of paper can become terrifying when given the wrong kind of life, and this is why the paper people's arrival is so memorable. They don't scream, they don't threaten, but they unsettle the world around them. They remind us that fear isn't always about strength or size. Sometimes fear is about the quiet, about the unnatural, about things that shouldn't move but do. The paper people don't just enter the farmhouse, they take it over. Their arrival is not an attack, it's an invasion. A slow, creeping takeover. That Courage, the cowardly yet brave dog, must find a way to stop. Courage has always been afraid. That is the first truth about him. His name may say Courage, but he shakes at every shadow, screams at every sudden noise, and hides behind doors when things go wrong. Yet the second truth is more important. Despite his fear, he never runs away. He always comes back. And in this episode, as the paper people swarm the farmhouse, this truth shines brighter than ever. The paper people are not like the monsters Courage usually faces. He can't outgrow them, he can't scare them away, and he can't reason with them. They don't speak. They don't even seem to think. They simply exist, fragile yet persistent, like living cutouts determined to claim the space around them. That makes Courage's job harder. His enemies are not strong, but they are endless, and their very existence feels wrong. For Courage, that is worse than facing a giant. His struggle begins with panic. He tries to keep Muriel safe, as always. He drags her away from the paper people, pulls her into safer rooms, and even tries to block the house with whatever he can find, boards, furniture, even his own small body. But every effort fails because paper can slip through cracks, fold under doors, and flutter in through the smallest openings. No matter what he does, more arrive. It feels like fighting the wind. This struggle is not just physical, it is emotional. Courage's greatest fear has always been losing Muriel. She is his comfort, his family, his reason to keep fighting. But Muriel does not see the paper people as dangerous. To her, they are curious and even gentle, and she scolds Courage for overreacting. This creates the deepest part of Courage's pain. No one understands his fear. Not Muriel, not Eustace, not anyone. He is alone in his terror, forced to protect the people he loves even while they dismiss his warnings. That is the heart of the show's theme. Fear is not always shared. Sometimes the things that terrify you don't scare anyone else, and that makes you feel small and foolish. Courage represents this feeling perfectly, screaming, trembling, but still fighting. He reminds us that bravery is not about the absence of fear, it's about action in spite of it. Every time he throws himself in front of Muriel, every time he tries one more trick to stop the paper people, he shows a strength that goes beyond physical power. Symbolically, the paper people are fascinating. They are fragile, but they persist. They are easily torn, but they return in numbers. They represent the fears we think are small, the problems we think we can dismiss, but that keep piling up until they surround us. They are anxiety made visible, thin, crumpled, and relentless. They prove that fear doesn't need to roar to be real. Sometimes it just rustles in the corner, never leaving you alone. For Courage, the struggle is a test of endurance. His mind tells him to panic, to scream, to run away, but his heart pulls him back to Muriel every time. Even when Eustace mocks him, even when Muriel brushes off his terror, Courage refuses to quit. His love is stronger than his fear, and that is what makes him a hero in his own strange way. The music and sound in this episode drive that point home. Every rustle of paper feels like a threat. Every creak of the house feels like the paper people slipping closer. Meanwhile, Courage's cries and mutters half words, half gibberish show his desperation. He isn't a polished hero. He isn't fearless. He's messy, scared, and clumsy, but he fights. And in his fight, we see ourselves. The deeper theme here is resilience. The paper people may be fragile, but they are relentless. Courage may be small, but he is relentless too. They are mirrors of each other, fragile beings refusing to give up. But while the paper people exist without purpose, Courage's persistence is driven by love. That difference is everything. It's what turns him from a cowardly dog into a true hero. By the time the struggle reaches its peak, the farmhouse is no longer just a home. It is a battlefield of Courage's determination against the endless rustle of paper feet. It shows us that fear is not something you erase. It's something you face, trembling, screaming, but still moving forward, and that is the lesson. Hidden inside the chaos, fear will always come back, just like the paper people. But what matters is whether you let it win, or whether you stand your ground for the people you love. When the paper people finally retreat, silence falls over the farmhouse once again. No smashing walls, no dramatic explosions, just the faint sound of paper rustling away into the night, as if a forgotten story had folded itself back into nothingness. To Muriel, it feels like a strange little incident, something odd but harmless. To Eustace, it's just another reason to mock Courage and call him useless. But to Courage, it was another battle survived, another reminder that fear never really leaves. It only changes its shape, and that's what makes this story so memorable. The paper people weren't monsters with claws or demons with glowing eyes. They weren't loud or violent. They were fragile, flat, and almost laughable if you looked at them too long. Yet, in their quiet persistence, they revealed a truth that runs through the entire series. The scariest things are not always the ones that roar. Sometimes fear is thin as paper, light as dust, yet heavy enough to weigh down your heart. Courage's final triumph here is not in destroying the paper people, because fear, like paper, never truly disappears. Instead, his triumph is in standing his ground, protecting Muriel, and reminding us of what courage really means. He doesn't fight because he wants glory. He doesn't fight because he thinks he can win. He fights because love gives him no other choice. Every scream, every trembling paw, every desperate plan is proof that fear cannot stop devotion. That is why he is Courage, the cowardly dog. Looking deeper, the paper people are more than just a creepy idea. They symbolize the fragility of life itself. We are all paper and some weight creased, torn, and easily blown off course. But just like them, we keep moving, keep folding ourselves back together, no matter how many times we're ripped apart. The difference is choice. The paper people move without purpose, like fears that feed on themselves. Courage, however, chooses to fight with purpose. He chooses love. He chooses resilience. And that choice makes all the difference. Cartoon Network didn't just air a scary cartoon with this series. It gave us something that worked on two levels. Children were captivated by the strange creatures and spooky stories, while adults found layers of meaning hiding underneath. The Paper People episode is a perfect example. It's eerie, surreal, and funny in its own twisted way, but it also speaks to a universal truth. We all battle fears that look silly to others. To the outside world, they might seem as light as paper, but to us, they are heavy, overwhelming, and constant. That's why Courage's story matters. It tells us that it's okay to be afraid. Fear is natural, fear is human. What matters is what we do with it. Courage never stops being scared, and that's what makes him so relatable. But he also never stops fighting, and that's what makes him inspiring. He shows us that bravery is not the absence of fear, it's action, despite fear. As the episode fades out, the farmhouse stands as it always does, quiet, isolated, waiting for the next nightmare to come knocking. For Courage, there will always be another strange enemy, another test, another long night of trembling and protecting, but that is his role. He is the cowardly dog who is braver than anyone else, because he chooses to act when it matters most. And so the lesson lingers long after the paper people are gone. Fear can come in the smallest shapes, in the lightest footsteps, in the most fragile forms. But just like courage, we can face it. We may shake, we may scream, we may feel foolish, but we can still stand our ground. Because in the end, true courage is not about being fearless. It is about protecting what we love, no matter how scared we are. So the next time you see a piece of paper drifting in the wind, you might think of courage. You might remember the paper people. And you might remember that even the thinnest, lightest things can carry the heaviest shadows. But if a small, trembling pink dog can face them, maybe, just maybe, we can too.